Coming up on today's Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, our season thoughts and projections. Trent and Biz with you today. We make our picks for week one. Iowa, a 20.5-point favorite. We'll get into that. The big game, Notre Dame and Ohio State, and our favorite pick of the week. And we talk about the Jackrabbits, all coming up on today's Locked On Hawkeyes podcast.
Our Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. I'm Trent Condon, Jace Bizgard with me here today. Biz, as we get ready for it, want to say thank you to everybody out there for making Locked On their first listen each and every day. It's game week. We made it. The long summer is over, and it's football season as we flip the calendar to September. How you doing, Biz?
Doing well. Trent, you said flip the calendar to September. September's off to a good start. My Mets continue to play really well, and the annual tradition of Nebraska having a week zero debacle has already happened. So things are going well, and I see we have another upgrade. You now have a bottom line scroll on this thing, Trent. Just fancier every week.
We're moving on up. Yeah, got the scroll, got some point spreads on there. If you check us out on the YouTube page, and if you do, make sure to click that subscribe button. I'm trying to get us over 1,000 subscribers by the time we get to Michigan game. That's the goal that I've set. We're a little over 700 right now. Very easy. Even if you don't plan on watching our mugs every week, just click the subscribe anyway. Help us out a little bit and get us over that 1,000 threshold. Yeah, we got the scroll here. Buckeyes, a 17.5-point favorite against Notre Dame. And I mentioned in the shows earlier this week, Biz, the Iowa point spread for this week. Offshore, it was open at 15.5. That was at 5 dimes. Here in the state of Iowa, the first numbers have started to come out that you can bet legally, as opposed to what we used to have to do back in the day. And the offshore accounts, Bet Rivers had it at 20.5. I was surprised by that. In fact, I thought maybe it even opened up here in the state a tick lower. Surprised to see that number, nearly 3 touchdowns the Hawkeyes favored.
Yeah, that seems odd, Trent, but Vegas must know something. They don't build the big buildings in Vegas for nothing, Trent. They obviously know something we don't, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. I had Statboy dig into the history of Iowa versus FCS opponents, and you'll see when we get into that history that 20.5 seems pretty high considering the last 6-7 times we've played FCS opponents. So I sure hope they know what they're talking about, because it'd be awful nice to have a convincing, easy victory instead of our usual nail biters.
I'll get into that as we'll break down the Jackrabbits a little bit deeper coming up here later in the show. But before that, it's before the season, and it's time to kind of lock us down where we anticipate this team is going to be, what they're going to look like this season. So just an overview, some thoughts of where we are going into the season, some projections of where we are. Biz, the floor is yours, and start things off. Just an overview of where we are as we get ready for the first game.
As we're 2 days out, Trent, and by now you can usually, the thing I've realized over the years is Krik Ferentz usually kind of tips his hand a little bit when it comes to his thoughts on the team. And I think the last couple of weeks, they have been mostly optimistic. They don't seem to be overly worried about the wide receiver situation, which obviously I think you and I are both worried about that. But they seem to think there's some diamonds in the rough there, and hopefully they're right. And hopefully Keegan Johnson's able to get on the field a little bit too. But I think the general vibe you get from the coaching staff and definitely from the players is that they really, really think this is a team that can be successful this year. So, who might argue with them, Trent? That's I think we've talked about it in the past. I don't think this is a 10-win team. I think the schedule is too hard for that. But the one thing Iowa has done significantly better the last 4 or 5 years is they haven't stubbed their toe in those early season games. Really, honestly, since the North Dakota State game, we've done a nice job of taking care of business in September. And if this team's going to be good, they better take care of business in September this year, because when the calendar flips to October, it's a pretty brutal schedule the rest of the way. So, maybe this is my rose-colored glasses, Trent, but as the season's gotten closer and closer, I think my optimism has increased a little bit for this team.
So I find myself at times going that direction. I really like what you said there about what we've heard from Kirk. You're right. You have to read between the lines a little bit with Kirk, but you can tell there's times that he's annoyed or he's frustrated or he is concerned about this team. And that is certainly not the vibe that he gave out on Tuesday during the press conference. There was that quiet confidence that you get from time to time with him. You're right, the wide receiver group, it looks scary, but hey, we've seen guys built like an Alec Wick, like a Jack Johnson go out there and be able to make plays for Iowa in the past. And everything that I've heard during camp is Arlen Bruce has been an absolute star. He's made that jump this year. Keegan Johnson, whatever he can give them, I think is going to be any positive probably throughout the month of September. If he can even give them, 15, 20, 25 snaps a game, that'll be a positive realm. Laporta, he's good. Lachey, he's good. They're good at that spot. So the optimism is there. And you say it all the time, Biz, and I completely agree. Ultimately, in Phil Parker, we trust. Krik Ferentz is certainly happy to win a 17-13 game, 14-13. If they got to ugly it up, you can rely so much on this defense that is going to be as deep as maybe they've ever been at the defensive line spot, a great linebacker crew, and they got the bodies in the defensive backfield where if they have to ugly it up and they're going to have to play a time of possession, field position game, well, if there's one coach that you got to be confident that can do those kind and find a way to win games, it is Krik Ferentz.
Well, and I think not only in Phil we trust, but I think we're getting to the point where you can say the same thing about in LeVar we trust also. I just think, I think the special teams will, you look at this, and most teams you look at it, like you got to come up with a new kicker. We lost the kick returner / punt returner of the year. Those are major red flags. But I just think, we'll find a way to make special teams a strength again. And in general, the coaching staff, I think it's a huge advantage that we didn't have any changes to our coaching staff. When you look back over the years, last year you were breaking in a new offensive line coach, and that showed. And hopefully year two with Barnett as the offensive line coach, and you had a couple other tweaks and things like that. And, I just think this year, there's a continuity matters for this program in a variety of different ways, and continuity of the coaching staff, same thing. So, I still have some major reservations about the offensive line. I'm still worried that that's going to be a weak spot. And you and I have talked about it in the past that, we just haven't had that consistency at the offensive line year in and year out that you'd like to see from an Iowa football program. And so, but, the rumors are that this offensive line is really playing well. And let's hope that that shows itself 48 hours from now. Because, again, I'm not sold on the offensive line, but if they can, South Dakota State's going to be a good test because that's the one area where we should truly dominate is in the trenches against them. They've got some talent, but when you look at their D-line, they are small and undersized and losing a lot of people there. So if our O-line can't push South Dakota State around them, then we're probably – I remember last year watching the Indiana game, we dominated Indiana. But I remember our good friend Lloyd halfway through the game kind of turned to me and said, we still can't run the ball. And he was right. We struggled running the ball all year long. And, that's the same thing. That's the main thing I'm looking for this week is if we can't get at least 150 yards on South Dakota State, then maybe my optimism will go out the window at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And, of course, the one remaining huge question, the big question, the most important position in sports is quarterback. And we've said our piece about Spencer Petras. I think people certainly are sick of me railing on him and what he is. He's a good kid. I just don't think he's a good quarterback. And I think there are too many parts of his game that you can't improve upon. I just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel that he is going to become even a B type quarterback. Best case scenario, he'll be average. He'll be above average. I think that's the highest ceiling that I can see from him. I would love to be proven wrong. I just don't see it. But with the better offensive line, with the tight end group that is healthy and putting up numbers, with the running game that is competent, maybe that is the light at the end of the tunnel that I have to bring my optimism for.
Yeah, I've always defended Spencer a little more than you have, and I'll do it again today. I do think he has the opportunity to be a B type quarterback. Is he ever going to be an A type quarterback? No. But with the arm strength and the fact that he's been here for 3 years, his general intelligence level, all those things, if he gets time and he has he's so tied in with the offensive line. To me, when I talk about the offensive line being good, I'm really talking about Spencer Petras being good also. Because if the O-line gives him time, I'm fine with him. He'll be all right. But as we've seen, A, he's not comfortable when the pocket collapses, and B, he's not going to go off script. And so, if you can give him 2.5 seconds in the pocket to make a decision and get to that second and third read, he'll be all right. So is he going to be a superstar? No, but I think he can be that B+ quarterback if everything goes well. And if, as we've seen in the past, if Iowa has a B+ quarterback, they're probably going to have a really good year.
So finish up with season predictions. I did this on my radio show earlier in the week, and I was surprised because I hadn't done it at that level. W'd and L'd it, went through it. I ended at 7-5. And I was kind of surprised. I thought I'd be more in the 8-4, maybe even 9-3 range. But first of all, the teams that they've struggled with. Wisconsin, yeah, you get it home. And I don't think the Badgers are going to be great, but got to see it against them. Purdue, we know about the deficiencies. And the other part is, are they just going to continue to win against Iowa State, Minnesota, and Nebraska in perpetuity? There's going to be a year that they're going to lose one of those games. And by the way, you still have Ohio State and Michigan on that schedule. And that's how I ultimately ended up at 7-5. I think the Illinois road test, the way that it's sandwiched in between the Michigan and Ohio State games, that becomes a more difficult game. And we know Bielema has got that program certainly heading in the right direction. I ended up at 7-5. Where are you prediction-wise with this team?
Yeah, give me 8-4. I think we'll start 4-0. I think we will have a good September. But then you look at from October 1 on, you could make a legitimate argument that we can win any of those 8 games. Probably not the at Ohio State, but the other 7, you can make a strong argument that we got a chance to win them. But on the flip side, you can make a legitimate argument we could lose all of them. So to me, the easy opt out there, Trent, is just go 4-4 over those last 8. So give me 8-4. But like I said, I'll reserve if the offensive line is as good as some people are claiming it's going to be. If the offensive line takes a jump, then I think 8-4 could be low. But again, I got to see it to believe it.
Well, 7.5 is the number currently. The over/under on the team, so Biz would be on the over. I'd be on the under, but I think it shows you Vegas. They came up with a pretty good number for this year's Hawkeyes. With that, we're going to continue our conversation. A breakdown of the Jackrabbits. Stat Boy, he's got some numbers for us this week, and we'll make our picks before we get out of here. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Well, Bet Online is a great resource for you as you're looking to get ready for both pro and college football and all your betting needs and the sports information for this season. You can find all the latest league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this week's games and the opening lines. Bet Online is your continued source for your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Biz, we jump from our season predictions and we go next to the opponent coming up this week. South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits, won the 2020 national championship at the FCS level in the spring season, the shortened season that they had that year. They've been in the semifinals 5 of the 6 years. This is not North Dakota State, but this is about as close to North Dakota State as you're going to find at the FCS level.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting. The first game of the year, you always get to a point where you think, I don't know about you, at least every year, I think I taught myself into at one point a week before the game that we're going to blow out the opponent. And then at some point during the week, I taught myself into, man, we're going to lose this game. So,
right.
I remember Wyoming a few years back with Josh Allen being incredibly scared and being like, man, we're in deep trouble here. And I remember even was Illinois State a few years back. Yes. They came in ranked in the top 10. And it was a year where, I remember thinking the same thing, like, man, we could be in trouble here as well. So, the good news is because of that connection, because they are so similar to North Dakota State, and because they have always had such good success, I think the odds of us overlooking them are absolutely zero. I think we'll come out ready to play. I think we will, if they beat us, it's because, obviously we can never know. Week 1, you can always go shoot yourself in the foot. But,
right.
The fact of the matter is, we should have a huge advantage in both trenches. They've got some definite skill position talent, but they've lost, I think, 3 offensive linemen. They've lost 3 defensive linemen. They've lost, I think, 3 or 4 people in their secondary. They're a really good FCS team. They're not what North Dakota State was. I mean, North Dakota State was an absolute juggernaut and still has been a juggernaut. But, when we lost to them in 16, I mean, they had won, 3 straight titles and had like 18 guys coming back. So, I mean, can we lose? Absolutely. Will we lose? We better not.
So you mentioned Stat Boy. He's got some numbers for it, and I think you bring up a good point. Their quarterback who won that national championship, tore his ACL in that championship game, was out last year. They brought in a grad transfer that got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he's still coming off an ACL injury, where he's going to be. I think both the offensive and defensive line deficiencies and the losses that South Dakota State had certainly gives us a big-time advantage there. There might be a hairy moment. I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden we look up and, it's the beginning of the second quarter and Iowa's down 7-3 and there's some grumbling in the crowd. But I think ultimately this is going to be one where Iowa does pull away and get it. We'll get to our picks a little bit later, but Stat Boy did a little information. What did he come up with this week as we look back at the FCS games?
Well, first, before we get into the info, we got to give our listeners a Stat Boy update. He's got a new job that he started last week, and he's coaching or helping coach not one but 2 fall softball teams. So I was a little worried that he may announce his retirement from the podcast, Trent, but he's willing to continue helping out. So and not only does he help out, but he obviously, in true Stat Boy form, he goes above and beyond. So I tried to keep it easy for him and just have him get me the general info on Iowa versus FCS opponents. But he took it a step farther. So we'll talk about the FCS opponents first, and then we'll get into Iowa versus our neighbors from South Dakota. So let's start with FCS, Trent. I didn't realize. What's your guess as to when the first year was that Iowa played an FCS opponent?
So FCS, after they made the change from 1AA to FCS, or are we going back in time?
1AA or FCS, either one.
Well, I remember didn't they play Drake in 85?
Yeah, but I don't think they were even one. I think they were like
something different.
I'm not sure they even qualify as an FCS. They're not even a scholarship school, are they?
Yeah, they're not. And I think maybe at that time in 85 they were, before they went non-scholarship, but I don't know. You got to help me out on this one, because all the different changes and how different kind of the structure of college football is.
It was a decade later, 1995, we played UNI. And before that, Trent, it was kind of the, like you said, the structure of college football changed. You look at the 3 years before that, Iowa played some legit non-conference opponents. In the 3 years before that, we played North Carolina State, Miami, Colorado, Oregon. And then all of a sudden, the world changed a little bit, and all of a sudden you quit having all these fun non-conference opponents. So from 1995 on, we have played, this will be our 13th FCS game. So we've played 12 FCS opponents in the last 27 years. So about one every other year. There's obviously the 2 famous games, the UNI nail biter in 09 with the 2 blocked kicks, and the loss at North Dakota State in 2016. But the other 10, not so famous. You ready to break down the amount of our wins in their 10 games?
Well, so I'm going to guess, kind of thinking back, of course, there's going to be a bunch of UNI games in here. You mentioned the Illinois State game, and I'm trying to rack my brain a little bit more. I think of some of the other FCS opponents that come in. Probably not a whole lot of variety.
We've had Montana and Montana State in there. We've had, but mostly it's UNI. I think it's about half UNI, half others. But so here's the breakdown, Trent. The other 10 wins. I mean, we're 11-1 total against them, with the UNI nail biter being one of the wins. The other 10 we've won by 21, 66, 24, 34, 43, 27. 11, 14, 8, 24, and 17. So the interesting thing, when you add in the UNI nail biter and the North Dakota State loss, the last 7 times we've played FCS opponents, we've only won by 20 or more one time.
Oh,
so when you're talking about that 20.5 point spread, Trent, it seems too obvious of a bet. So, like I said, Vegas must know something, because it seems to me that 20.5 is about a touchdown too high.
I'm going to have to take a peek here before we make our picks and see if that point spread has come down at all since it was released this morning. But interesting notes there. And as you're kind of going through some of those games, but the 66-point win, I'm trying, who was that against? Was that the Tavian Banks game?
No, I think it was you and I. I can pull it up here. Statboy sent me the info. I don't jot it all down very well, but I'm sure we can talk Statboy into sending the full list out on Twitter afterwards.
Yes. We'll make sure we have Statboy do that, and you can kind of peruse and look back at some of the memories of FCS and the big victories.
Hold on. I found it, so we'll go through it real quick. Here's your opponents, Trent. You and I was 66-0. So the first three times we played, it's you and I 3 times, and then Montana, then the legendary game against Maine, and then you get the you and I 1-point nail biter, and then quite possibly the worst opponent Iowa's ever played, Tennessee Tech.
Oh, yeah, the rain game.
How do we play Tennessee Tech? That's an embarrassment. And then you get you and I again, Missouri State, you and I, the North Dakota State loss, you and I, and then Illinois State. So there's your summary. So a lot of you and I's in there with a random mix of and including the legendary Tennessee Tech game.
If we're going to play somebody bad from the FCS, can't we just play bad ones? I'd rather have a Tennessee Tech than South Dakota State or North Dakota State personally.
I used to think that way. I kind of like that we're playing South Dakota State, to be honest with you. Like, you could do what Iowa State's playing, what they're playing some directional school from Missouri. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to get anything out of that game. Right. I don't know. I feel like last year playing Indiana to start the year really catapulted us to that good start. I mean, and some national attention. So, should we have played North Dakota State 6 years ago? No, but I don't know. Part of me says, to me, South Dakota State is very similar to you and I. And, they're a really good FCS team. They're not a juggernaut like North Dakota State is. So, I don't know, take care of business. If we're the type of team that we think we can potentially be, you should beat this team by double digits. And so, that's the other side of what Statboy got me, Trent. I just read you the list. We've obviously never played South Dakota State. But in true Statboy fashion, Trent, there was a 2-decade stretch where we played the University of South Dakota pretty much constantly. You want to guess when that 2 decades was?
I'm going to say this was probably back in the 1920s.
Yeah, good guess. From 1917 to 1940, we played them 8 times, including 5 times between 1934 and 1940. You want to hear the scores of those contests?
Well, let's see. We're going back. We're getting to the Iron Man team, of course, the Niall Kinnick team here. I'm going to guess there was like some 77-0 in there or something.
Yeah, I was going to say there's some good Iowa teams in there, and obviously some not very good South Dakota teams. So here's your breakdown. Starting in 1917, we beat them 35-0, 26-13, and that's the aberration there. That 13 points, as you'll hear, was rare. The last 6 games were 19-0, 34-0, 47-2, 33-7, 41-0, and 46-0. So total score 281-22. So the state of South Dakota has not fared very well against Iowa over the years. So they're looking for some payback come Saturday.
I'm looking for one of those 43-2. That's what I'm looking for Saturday. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. If that happens, Trent, first of all, Vegas was right, and second of all, you and I were probably wrong on what our predictions are. Maybe we are looking at a 10-win team if we can beat South Dakota by 40.
Let's hope that's the case. Well, speaking of that number, we're going to do that when we continue. A look at the point spreads this week, presented by Bet Online. Our picks for the week. Each and every week, we'll pick the Iowa game, the big national game of the week, and our best bet of the week. That's as we continue here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. All right, Biz, final time as we wrap things up and time to make our picks for this week. Of course, our old podcast, it was the Degenerate Hawkeyes podcast. Now we got our Degenerate picks for the week presented by Bet Online. Let's get into it here, Biz. And our national game this week, it is the Notre Dame Ohio State game. That'll be at the Horseshoe. 17.5 is the number there. Iowa currently favored by 20.5 here in the state of Iowa over South Dakota State. And then whatever we want for the final. Let's kick things off with the Iowa game, 20.5. I've already tipped my hand here. I have grabbed it. In fact, when I saw that point spread here this morning, I jumped on it right away. Give me the Jackrabbits plus 20 in the hook.
Trent, always scary to say it, but I agree. So I just 20.5 just seems too much. I just think sometimes with these FCS spreads, they're guessing a little bit, and I think they're guessing too high on this one. So it's one of those, Trent, where we agree, but we'd be happy to be wrong on this one. So if the Hawks win, it's a win-win situation. If the Hawks win by 14, maybe you and I win a little bit of money. If they win by 24, we're never going to complain about the Hawks dominating the game. So before we go on, Trent, before we go to the game of the week, you forgot to tell our listeners what's the standings after last week.
After last week, what are you talking about? We didn't do picks last week.
We did too. I picked a winner and you picked a loser.
Oh, what did we? I don't even remember.
I got a lot going on. I picked Northwestern over Nebraska, and you picked some ridiculous New Mexico State pick over Nevada or something.
Yeah, what a ripoff that game was too. Yeah, that was lock of the year. Jerry Kill's playing the wrong quarterback for 2.5 quarters. He finally puts his backup in. After 5 turnovers, they come roaring back, and then a backdoor cover out of Nevada. Oh, that was a ripoff. And guess what? I'm on Kill's boys again tonight against the Gophers.
Just make sure, Trent. I want to make sure that everybody knows I'm 1-0 and you're 0-1.
No, that was unofficial. We do it with 3 picks a week. 3 picks a week. This starts this week. If I would have won last week, yeah, we would have started last week. All right. So, all right, I'll give you credit. You're 1-0. I'm 0-1 on the season. If it comes down to a tiebreaker at the end, week 0, you'll get the win. How about that?
Well, if you just keep betting Jerry Kill, if you ride the New Mexico State train, I'm sure the Aggie train will, do you well as the year goes on, Trent.
Who do you like? Notre Dame getting 17.5 at Columbus. Marcus Freeman, of course, a former Buckeye, taking over his first regular season game. He did coach in the bowl game last year in the Festival against Oklahoma State, but it's a huge number. To me, it almost feels like a trap. Which way are you leaning, Buckeyes and the Irish?
Yeah, I don't like either side, to be honest with you. 17.5 seems too high, but I don't have a lot of confidence in I think it'll be a game where I think Marcus Freeman will keep it competitive for a while. The one thing I feel confident about is that Ohio State will put up a lot of points. They always do. So I think Notre Dame will keep it close enough that I think it'll be a little bit of a shootout. I think Ohio State will put up at least 40, which means Notre Dame's just got to get to 20 to cover or get the over. The over is 59, Trent. So give me the over.
Going with the over. I'm going to lay it with the Buckeyes here, 17.5. I think this is a team that is just locked in, ready to go. And Notre Dame, they are not the 5th best team in the country. A brand new quarterback going into the Horseshoe. Biz, we've been to that building. It is loud. It is going to be a raucous environment there. I just don't like the way this is setting up for Notre Dame. And when the Buckeyes get rolling, we know what they can do offensively. I just think they're going to win this thing pretty handily. I could see 34-7. 38-10, something in that range. I really have some concerns and some questions about Notre Dame offensively. So we're on the opposite side, certainly as it pertains to the total, but my pick is the Buckeyes and laying the points.
I don't see any way Ohio State holds someone to 7 or 10 points, but maybe I'm wrong. I just don't. I don't know. You've seen those the Oregon game last year. Oregon just came out and just pushed them around. You saw Michigan at the end of the year last year. Ohio State is not that physical of a defense, and maybe they will be down the road. They've got a new defensive coordinator, but I don't. I could be totally wrong, but I think both teams will put some points up on the board.
Yeah, I like Jim Knowles. I'm with you, but one thing I did find doing a little research, Jim Knowles' teams usually make a big leap in his second year as defensive coordinator. That first year has been some growing pains at a couple of his last stops. So an interesting angle on that one. Wrapping up with our best bet of the week. Where are you going this week, Biz?
Oh, I wavered back and forth. I really wanted to take Oregon, actually. I think that spread's way too high, but I talked myself out of it because I'm like, I've learned over the years you never bet against Alabama, and I think Georgia's kind of getting into that category as well. So that was my initial pick, but I ended up changing my mind, Trent. I'm going to go with a team that's done me very well the last few years. Give me Arkansas -6 for multiple reasons. One, I just think they're a team that's on the uptick. I think they're going to have a really good year. Two, I think Cincinnati is just not going to be that good of a team. They lost a lot. I think this is a game where if Cincinnati doesn't go to the the playoff last year, this is probably a double digit point spread. I think -6 is just too low. And third, I just wanted to do it for our favorite listener, Arkansas Alley. I wanted to start with a woo pig suey for her. So give me the Razorbacks. I love Coach Pittman. I think they're a team that, like I said, I think they're going to continue to get better every year. I like him as a coach. I think he just does an excellent job and they'll be ready to roll. I don't think they're certainly not going to overlook Cincinnati, and I think they'll win by double digits. So, well, give me the Razorbacks -6.
Woo pig suey, and I hate to do it. Guess what I had down for my pick of the week?
Cincinnati.
No, Arkansas.
There you go. Oh boy, there's the official kiss of death.
Yeah, the double kiss of death this week as we are both on the Razorbacks. Apologies to Arkansas Alley. I did have one other game, but it was way down the line, and I didn't like it enough to do it. Yeah, I just kept going back to that, and that line, certainly as it sit under a touchdown. I have seen, though, a couple of shops, it has got up to 7, so keep an eye on that. Do your shopping. Our friends at Circa, they always say, shop around, find that best number, and that's what you're going to be doing. So I would say, seeing the way that thing is trending, if you're like us and you want to bet Arkansas, do it now because it's probably going to get to a touchdown and maybe even 7.5 by the time kickoff comes around.
If it gets to 7.5, that'd be really crazy. You don't see many spreads start at 4 and get above a touchdown. But
right. A lot of movement.
They'll push it up towards the touchdown, but well, Trent, it's officially kiss of death to start the year. I can only let's hope we're both right for once.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. We've seen that certainly in the past. Biz, wrapping things up here with you. You'll be at Krik Stadium. It'll be my first home opener I missed in I don't know how long. Got some family stuff going on this weekend, but I'll be back in Krik for the Iowa State game in week 2. So hold down the fort and make sure. And week 1, got to pace yourself a little bit. Even with the 11 o'clock kickoff, people get a little too excited sometimes at our tailgate.
Yeah, I'm not too. I have that one tailgate a year, Trent, where I don't pace myself. It's not going to be the South Dakota State game. Okay. I think I'll be okay for the 11 a.m. kickoff. Plus, I've got multiple kids coming with me, so
okay, it slows you down a little bit.
I get fully irresponsible once a year, but it's not when my kids are around. So I'll be a responsible dad and a safe tailgater for just for you. I'll have a couple, Trent, but nothing irresponsible. So.
Well, we will recap things next week. We'll get ready for the Iowa State matchup, and we'll get our chance to see the black and gold on the field at Krik Stadium. Looking forward to it. Coming up tomorrow, LaShawn Daniels, he'll be back with me for the Friday edition of the Locked On Podcast. For Biz, I'm Trent. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with you again next week.
Go Hawks.